Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA predictions for UFC 128 Shogun versus Jones. 3 shows have passed since I updated my record last, so let's break it down. Going into UFC 127, I was 60-30, but with the news that the Vera Silva fight was ruled no contest, I wiped that loss off my record, so that dropped me to 60-20-9. I went 3-1-1 at UFC 127, 3-1 at UFC Live, and 2-2 at the last Strikeforce show to push my overall record to 68-33. That's a little bit better than 2 of every 3 right, but I'd still like to get to 75%. Please check out MMAgeeks.cc.co. My last video posted on their main page and got over 8,000 views, which I appreciate greatly, so please check them out. My videos, as always, are associated with sportsinteraction.com. Please check out the description below to get your link and sign up and get your bonus. I've updated my rankings with movement in the lower half of the UFC welterweight rankings and some new fighters pushing up the ranks in the lightweight division. So please comment on those, my picks, and the newly named Kamikaze Countdown, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And last but not least, I've done some more updating with my intro and credits along with a brand new logo. I've also created a new intro for my main event, so please give that a look. Now, UFC 128 will take place on March 19th live from Prudential Center in New Jersey. I'll be giving my predictions for the 5 main card fights, but with so many events in such a short period of time, I didn't have time to properly break down the televised undercard fights. And on that note, it's time to get to my first predictions. We get started on the main card with a heavyweight battle between UFC and Pride veteran 27-8-2 Mirko Cro Cop and 8-1 Brendan the Hybrid Schaub. My record for predicting fights for each fighter currently sits at 1-0. Mirko's coming off a knockout defeat versus Frank Mir, and before that he had won 2 in a row. Well, Schaub earned his 3rd straight win when he decisioned Gabriel Gonzaga. Now, there are no odds posted for this matchup. I would think they would be in the range it'd be fairly close, with Schaub betting being a slight favorite on $1.65 and Cro Cop at $1.90. Now, this is a perfect example of 2 fighters heading in the opposite direction. Schaub climbing the heavyweight ladder and Mirko doing his best to hold off his apparent decline. Now, I really can't foresee much of this fight taking place on the mat, but Schaub is a BJJ purple belt. He has no career submissions. In his last fight, he did shoot against Gonzaga twice, but he had no real success, so I can't see him taking this fight to the mat. And now, even though Mirko has 4 career submission wins, including his last in the UFC, his mat work is for more defensive purposes than offensive. He is difficult to take down, he has a pretty good sprawl, and can lock in a guillotine choke if his opponent sticks his neck in too far. Okay, now to the striking game. Let's start with Schaub. He has 5 TKO wins via punches and showed improving stand-up against Gonzaga. Breaking down his attack, he throws a pretty quick jab and has a powerful right hand, which stopped Chris Tushishir and did some serious damage against Gonzaga when he connected. He will throw his shots in combinations, sometimes doubling up the jab and then launching that overhand right. He also demonstrated the ability to change levels in his last fight, which I liked. Now, he doesn't throw a lot of kicks, but I would think that as he becomes more comfortable with his hands, he will start to use the kicks more often. His evolving striking skills also include improving footwork. He moves fairly well for a lightweight and avoids being a stationary target. Now, Gonzaga did have some success when he landed leg kicks, as Schaub wasn't as willing to come forward when those kicks were landing. But at the same time, the power of Brendan's strikes and fear of being countered made Gonzaga hesitant to kick throughout the majority of that fight. Mirko, on the other hand, has made a career out of kicks with highlight reel head kick knockouts, along with some incredibly nasty leg strikes to the body and legs. That being said, Mirko, the Mirko that's destroyed his opponents in the past hasn't really been seen in a while. He did string together a 2-fight win streak, but looking back at those fights, they really were not the most impressive. He stopped a last-minute injury replacement, who is a natural 205-pounder and more of a grappler than a striker, Anthony Peroche, and then tapped Pat Barry after Barry knocked him down twice in the first round, then suffered a broken hand and foot, and for the most part, Barry was more concerned with hugging Mirko than finishing him off when the opportunity arose. But Cro Cop is still dangerous. He really opened up with some nice kick variations in the Barry fight. He will throw the high kicks that can end a bout very quickly, and he'll attack the body and the legs, which can really do a lot of damage. That can be the key in this fight, as I already mentioned. When Gonzaga used leg strikes, Schaub wasn't nearly as aggressive, so that should be a part of Mirko's attack. Defensively, he's solid. He keeps his hands up tight to his chin, circles away from his opponent's attack, and uses a 2-hand push to create separation. His boxing is good too. He uses an overhand left or left jab to do a lot of damage while stalking his opponent, constantly moving forward. Against Junior Dos Santos, he connected several times with a straight left, and there was some real damage beginning to pile up on the Brazilian's face. He has success when he opens up with his striking, pushing forward aggressively with combinations, but conversely, his striking becomes very stunted and ineffective when he's faced with an aggressive striker. I'm really curious to see how Cro Cop rebounds from that horribly inactive fight with Mir, where he looked for the most part disinterested. Like I said, if he kicks he could really back Schaub off. But if Schaub was able to land with power, I wouldn't be surprised to see Mirko back off and not throw that many kicks. Further, Schaub is going to have a 5-inch reach advantage, which will help him to land his strikes, and Cro Cop had issues with the right hand of Barry as he got dropped twice in the first round, and Brennan's right is very effective as I already mentioned. I see this fight very similar to the Cro Cop Dos Santos fight, a hungry up-and-comer against a veteran that really doesn't have a lot left to prove. I really looked this fight over to see if Cro Cop could win this matchup, and he can if he lets his hands and legs go. But Schaub is improving, and I think he'll be prepared for this matchup as he has everything to win. I wouldn't be surprised if Schaub stops Mirko, but I'll take Brendan Schaub to defeat Mirko Cro Cop by decision. Our next fight comes in the middleweight division as Dan Miller, 13-4, will square off with Nate the Great Marquardt, 33-10-2. This will be my third time calling a Marquardt fight, and I'm 2-0 so far, with Nate dropping his last fight to Yushin Okami after defeating Husamir Paul Harris. And for Miller, this is prediction number 1. Miller is riding a 2-fight winning streak after having dropped 3 in a row to Chael Sonnen and Damian Maia and Michael Bisping. Dan Miller is a late replacement for Yoshihiro Akiyama, as Akiyama has pulled out of this fight because of the tragic events that have taken place and are still going on in Japan, and really you can't blame him for that. And my thoughts go out to all of those enduring the natural disasters both in Japan and other areas around the world. Now back to the fight. On the books, Sports Interaction had Nate as the favorite, paying out at $1.28. Akiyama was the dog at $3.25. I think the odds could be in the same ballpark for Miller. He might be a slightly bigger underdog. Now this is a huge fight for both guys, so the pressure is going to be on. I mentioned the names of the fighters that have defeated Miller, and they're all marquee middleweights. So the UFC has given him high-profile fights before, and he hasn't been able to get the job done. So he really needs this win, or else he'll be back to the undercard for him. Now Nate Marquardt is a top contender who's recovered from defeats before, but he was very underwhelming in his last fight against Okami and will need to be better tonight. Now, recent late replacement fighters like Brian Ebersol and Chris Weinman were victorious, but I attribute that to the element of the unknown. Weinman only had 4 previous bouts for his opponent to prepare for, and Ebersol, even with 60 career fights, had flown under the radar for the most part. You toss in Chris Lytle's knee injury, and it's a recipe for disaster. Dan Miller, on the other hand, has 8 UFC bouts, so even with just a week, I would think that there won't be many surprises, if any, for Marquardt. Looking first at Nate, he is a well-decorated BJJ black belt with 15 career submission wins to his credit, but only surprisingly 2 in the UFC. To go along with this submission game, Nate has heavy ground and pound and solid grappling skills. Nate has a good shot grabbing onto a single or double and has pretty good takedown defense to go with it. If Nate begins to unload with his ground and pound, he is quite capable of bringing about a referee stoppage. Dan Miller, just like his brother, has an amateur wrestling background and is a BJJ black belt. He has never been submitted and holds 8 submission victories, including 3 in the UFC. Miller is a good shot. In his fight with Michael Bisping, he was able to take him down, which isn't an easy thing to do. Defensively, Miller has good takedown defense, defended well against Maia's attempts, and when he was taken down, was able to get back up. He has a solid defensive guard, threatening from his back with submissions, and he is very capable of neutralizing his opponent's top game. Moving to the striking, Nate has solid hands, has a number of knockouts on his resume, including the impressive knockout of Damian Maia. Marquardt is a patient striker that will wait and then attack in bursts. He has a vicious power in his right and heavy kicks to the legs, body, and head. He got away from his leg strikes in the Okami fight, which I think really took away from his striking attack. Another thing that Nate has going for him is his timing. Like I said, he is very patient, and he likes to hold back and engage at the right moment. He has shown the ability to throw strikes at opportune times, both as the initial attack or as a counter strike. Marquardt does have issues, though, when his opponent brings pressure. In the Sonnen fight, Chael constantly took him down, giving him little opportunity to rest, while Okami took the center of the cage, constantly moving forward, forcing Marquardt to focus on defending instead of engaging. Miller's striking is improving, but he doesn't have a lot of knockout power, so he's not a real threat to end the fight on the feet. Against Michael Bisping, he connected on several occasions, but wasn't able to follow up effectively. What I like about his stand-up is that he uses combinations well, changes levels, attacking the body, sometimes opting to deliver body shots and then finish with one on his opponent's chin. Miller will also utilize leg kicks, attacking both the inside and outside, and since in most fights he is not adverse to being put on his back, he will attack without hesitation. Along with never being submitted, Miller has never been knocked out, but he does seem to slow down a little as the fight advances, not too much, but it is noticeable. Secondly, he holds his left hand a little too low for my liking, which makes him vulnerable to a fighter with a powerful right hand like Marquardt possesses. I look at Marquardt, and it's been a while since he's put together a really good overall effort. He got smothered by Sonnen and Okami, caught Paul Harris when Husamir lost focus, and knocked out Maya in only 21 seconds. The latter is his best performance of the four, but a one-punch knockout like that, albeit impressive, isn't exactly a dominating performance. Nate has suffered 10 defeats to date. Never once has he suffered back-to-back losses, so he knows how to rebound. I already mentioned that Nate has issues with a fighter that brings constant pressure. Miller doesn't fit that mold. He likes to attack and then back off, and will continue to back away if his adversary continues to come forward. Without a constant forward push, Miller will allow Nate to set up his strikes, and this will make Marquardt's striking that much more effective. The biggest concern for me is that I don't see an area where Dan can win this fight because Nate is simply too well-rounded. On the feet, Nate's technique and power will be too much for Miller. Maya had success in his stand-up versus Dan, and I think Marquardt will as well. If the fight goes to the mat, Dan is a very game opponent, but I can't see him doing too much offensively as Nate is simply the more talented grappler. The only real advantage Dan will possess will be the home field one, which I don't think will be enough in this fight. Dan has never been finished, so I have Nate Marquardt dominating and defeating Dan Miller by a decision. Up next, lightweights collide as top contender 19-2 Jim Miller welcomes undefeated WEC veteran 7-0-2 Kamal the Prince of Persia Shalarus. This is my third prediction for Jim Miller, and I'm 0-2 so far. Most recently, he has scored wins against Charles Oliveira and Gleison Tibau, which were part of a 6-fight winning streak. Kamal Shalarus got back in the win column in his last outing. Previous to that, he had picked up a draw against Jamie Varner. Now, there are no odds posted of this fight, but I would peg Miller as the significant favorite at roughly $1.15 and Shalarus at $3.10, based on his relative unknown status beyond the WEC. When I predicted my first Jim Miller fight, I thought that Gleison Tibau's size and strength was going to be too much for him, but Miller used his speed and striking skills to pick up the W. Against Charles Oliveira, I expected the dynamic striking and slick BJJ of the Brazilian would be the undoing of Miller, but the New Jersey native took Oliveira down and eventually tapped him out. So, along with these two defeats that I've picked up, I've gained a pretty good understanding of what Miller brings to the cage, I think. But then again, I'm 0-2, so who knows? Alright, let's start with Kamal Shalarus. He is a decorated wrestler and grappler. He took part in an Olympic qualifier and has competed in the ADCC Submission Wrestling Championships. But from what I've seen, he is incredibly difficult to take down. In his fight with Dave Jansen, an NCAA Division I wrestler, Kamal shrugged off all of Jansen's takedown attempts. In fact, UFC.com has Kamal's takedown defense in 4 WEC fights at a perfect 100%, while having completed 9 of 14 of his own, including 4 against Jansen. Now, for a fighter with such an impressive wrestling pedigree, 14 takedown attempts in 4 fights isn't really a lot, and that's because Shalarus prefers to stand and bang, which I will talk about shortly. When he does take a fighter to the mat, don't expect a lot of submission attempts, as he prefers to use ground and pound and focus his assault on the body, and what this can do is create openings to attack an opponent's head when they begin to protect the midsection. Moving to Jim Miller's grappling skills, he's a BJJ black belt with 11 career submissions, including his last victory via knee bar. He's an NCAA Division I wrestler. He has great control on the mat, works at a frantic pace, and has effective ground and pound. To say the least, Miller is very skilled on the mat, but this might be an opponent that really pushes him. Miller has good takedown defense, just like Shalarus, and I wonder if this might be a matchup where their skills keep this fight off the mat, and if not, I give the edge to the Olympic caliber wrestler. Moving to the striking, Miller hasn't racked up the knockouts, but he does have power, especially in his right hand. Against Tibau, he rocked him on several occasions, and I attribute his ability to land his strikes to his hand speed and use of straight punches. Where some fighters, Shalarus included, like to throw big looping strikes, Jim will snap off short straight punches that can do a lot of damage. Along with his boxing, Jim will mix in kicks and can really change it up with his combinations. Further, Miller is quick on his feet, uses a lot of movement getting in and out to attack and then avoid damage. On the other side of the cage, Kamal has a lot of power in his strikes, both punches and kicks, looking for the stoppage every time he loads up. He has good power in his right and will fake with his left, looking to force a reaction and then attack. The most influential aspect of Kamal's striking could be his kicks. They are very heavy, and he can really take a lot of movement away from an opponent when he starts to land them, so Miller will need to watch out for this. Now, he doesn't use a lot of movement himself, and he likes to stand right in front of his opponent. He does have a good chin, but he has been hurt before, but he was able to quickly recover. As I mentioned, he has trouble defending against straight tactical punches. Jamie Varner did a lot of damage in that bout. by keeping things short and simple, using a technique to get the better of Kamal's power. I think that Miller's use of straight punches will give Kamal problems, but the big power of Chalarouche will be as equally dangerous for Miller, and along with the heavy leg kicks, Miller might become hesitant to engage. The biggest issue I have with Chalarouche is his endurance. Speed isn't a huge part of his attack, but he will become vulnerable as a result of his fatigue. While Jim Miller is able to go the distance with no problem, so he will have a huge edge there. Now, I rewatched the Miller-Maynard fight to see what Gray did to win that one. In their bout, Gray was the better wrestler, defending and storing takedowns, and used his heavy hands to bloody Miller's face. I think that Kamal could replicate Maynard's success, and if he's able to connect with his leg kick, Chalarouche could be in business. But I am still concerned with the fatigue issue. That could be costly if we go the distance, so there's a big risk there. If Miller can't take Kamal down, he is going to need to rely on his quickness, but that advantage could disappear because of the leg kicks again. I expect a war in this fight, and I expect Kamal Chalarouche to open some eyes. He will control the wrestling game and use his power to force Miller to backpedal. Miller has never been finished, but if Chalarouche connects, that could change in a hurry. So here we go again. I'm going to take Kamal Chalarouche to defeat Jim Miller, and I will limit my risk, and I'll say he'll defeat him by decision. The co-main event will take place in the bantamweight division and will be contested by two UFC newcomers. His former WEC featherweight champion, the California kid Uriah Faber, 24-4, will meet the former WEC bantamweight champion, 18-6-1, Eddie Weinman. Weinman is riding a 4-fight winning streak with 2 consecutive knockout of the nights, and Faber made a successful bantamweight debut in his last outing after dropping his matchup with Jose Aldo. Now, there are no odds posted for this contest, but I would think Faber will be the favorite on $1.55 and Weinman the dog at $2.10. Now, there's a lot riding in the outcome of this match. It is already being speculated that should Faber emerge victorious, he would coach against Dominic Cruz in the Ultimate Fighter and then challenge him for the bantamweight title when the show completes. Eddie Weinman, the original WEC bantamweight champion, would love to change those plans. Looking at Weinman first, his strongest point of attack is his stand-up, so I'm going to briefly touch upon his grappling skills first. He has a wrestling background, but because he is so proficient with his striking game, he doesn't really use his wrestling. UFC.com has Weinman's ability to complete takedowns at 100%, but he's only attempted 2, and one was the KO slam against Kenneth Stone, so not your typical takedown. He has also recorded 5 career submission wins, the last coming in 2008 where his opponent tapped because of strikes. So Weinman's submission game is not something that most fighters prepare for when they meet him in the cage. On the negative side of things, he has been tapped out 4 times, including his last defeat back at WEC 40, where Ronnie Yaya used a rear naked choke for the win. His takedown defense is solid, and I attribute some of that to his fast beat making him hard to get a hold of. But in his decision defeat versus Chase Beebe, he was put on his back 5 times, something you'll have to watch out for in UFC 128. Now, Uriah Faber utilizes his mat work far more effectively, having scored 13 career submissions, including 7 of his last 8 wins coming by way of tap-out, while at the same time never having tasted defeat as a result of a submission. Uriah is a former NCAA Division I wrestler and BJJ purple belt, and he knows how to use these styles to complement one another. When he elects to take the fight to the ground, he uses his wrestling background to shoot in for a single and to control his opponent on the mat, and then uses jiu-jitsu to go sub-hunting. Faber has good upper body strength and likes to utilize a front headlock to control his opponent, which he can quickly transition to a guillotine choke or a rear naked choke with relative ease. The crushing submission power is something that Faber and the rest of the members of Team Alpha Male are quickly becoming known for. Standing the fighters up, I would give the edge in the striking to Weinman based on his technical skills and elusive style. Against George Roop, Eddie put on a striking clinic, demonstrating an uncanny ability to close in, slip the attacks of Roop while staying in range to deliver his own heavy-handed assault. He uses a lot of feints, forcing a reaction and then attacking. He attacks from multiple angles, changes up his stance, and is constantly a moving target. He mixes together combinations with both punches and kicks, and he changes levels very well, and attacking the body with ferocious strikes. Against Will Campuzano, Weinman hit Campuzano with a vicious body shot that capped off a violent assault and dropped his opponent to the canvas. When faced with the opponent's leg strikes, Eddie can time the delivery, catch the leg, and deliver a powerful overhand right. His right is his primary weapon of choice. He likes to wade forward using his head movement to avoid oppositional strikes and then deliver that powerful right hand to the chin of an opponent. One concern that I did notice with Weinman's striking defense is that he has a tendency to allow his hands to drop. Because he is so difficult to hit, he can get away with this. But should Weinman meet a fighter with skills to exploit this opening, it could be devastating. Now Faber striking is effective, but for other reasons. Faber is not nearly as technical, but uses his speed and explosiveness very effectively. He does use movement circling away, and at the opportune time darts into a engage and then backs off. He has a powerful right hand as well, and will throw it alone or as part of the combination, and he will also use leg kicks. Faber likes to implement unorthodox attacks as well, launching a flying knee, kicks, and elbows, which can make his opponent uncomfortable trying to defend against them. In a similar fashion to Weinman, who drops his hands when he attacks, Faber's major flaw could be that he lowers his head when he throws strikes, which could make him quite vulnerable to a talented striker like the one he'll be facing on this night. Further, in the Jose Aldo matchup, Faber struggled in the stand-up because he was the second fastest guy in the cage. A lot of his success comes when he is quicker than his foe, so if Weinman can prove to be too fast for Faber, it could be the turning point. I think this match is going to come down to whether or not Faber can/want to put Weinman on his back. When Uriah fought Dominic Cruz at 145, he recognized that Cruz was probably the more technically sound striker and opted to take the fight to the mat and eventually earn the submission. I think that he will take a similar approach in this fight. Based in their impressive striking skills, I would like to see Weinman and the current champ Cruz meet one day. That fight could be an epic stand-up war, but I don't see it happening just yet. So my prediction is Uriah Faber to defeat Eddie Weinman by submission. And now it's time for the main event of the evening.
And now, this is the moment you've all been waiting for. Mauricio Shogun!
UFC 128's main event will feature a collision of two light heavyweight superstars as the challenger 12-1 John Bones Jones looks to dethrone the champion 19-1 Mauricio Shogun Rua. I'm a perfect 2-0 in predicting Jones fights. Well, this will be my first prediction for Shogun. Rua is looking to defend his title for the first time after defeating Lyoto Machida, and Jones has won 3 in a row leading up to this bout. Despite being the champ, Shogun will be a sizable underdog, paying $2.48, and Johnny Jones will be the favorite at $1.48. Before the bell even rings, there are various elements that could play a role in the outcome of this main event. First, you have the ring rust for Shogun. He's been away for roughly 10 months, and to compound that, he is recovering from a surgery, so you have to wonder how he will respond. On the other side of things, you have John Jones, a fighter with seemingly unlimited potential, stepping into the biggest fight of his life, so how does he react to the added pressure? And he is doing this on short notice. Many people might say that because he took next to no damage against Bader, there's no real issue here, but I'd like to point out that preparing for a fight of this magnitude against such a talented opponent in Shogun should not be taken lightly, and the camp he just had was for a fighter in Bader that shares very few similarities with Rua. One advantage he does have is that he is a member of the same camp as Shogun's original opponent, Rashad Evans, so the guys charged with prepping Bones are well versed in the upcoming opponent. And finally, going back to Shogun, I've heard he didn't intend to make too many alterations to his camp now that he is preparing for Jones and not Rashad Evans, which concerns me. He did say he would bring in a few new guys to help in preparation for the different physical attributes possessed by Jones, but to me I would think that a fighter trained to fight Evans would generate a fairly different game plan than what you would work for Jones. But that's just me. Now let's get to the fighters. Since I've recently talked about Johnny Jones, I'm only going to touch upon what he brings to this title fight. On the feet, he has an incredible reach. Bader had issues getting inside and did a lot of swinging and missing. He's not a technically sound striker as he still is fairly raw, but what he does do well is present a lot of odd angles and variations of strikes that keeps his opponent off balance and backing up. He throws a spinning elbow and lots of jump kicks and knees which can do a great deal of damage. More traditionally, he will use some very heavy leg kicks, sometimes electing to go high and will throw out a left hook which, if it connects, can do damage. He is relatively calm on his feet and keeps a relaxed pressure on his adversary by pushing forward constantly with controlled movement. His ground game is what really impresses me. He shot for a single leg against Bader and scored it with ease, and he will also use trips and throws to get the fight to the ground. Because of the size advantage, he's adept at controlling his opponents on the mat, leading up to the submission. He was able to do pretty much whatever he wanted against a talented and strong wrestler in Bader. I like his submission game. He threatened with various chokes, taking full advantage of his long limbs to procure the eventual tap out of UFC 126. His ability to attempt submissions complements his already lethal ground and pound. So when the fight hits the mat, Bones has multiple ways of ending it. The champion Shogun Rua is easily the most talented striker Bones has faced to date. In his last two fights, Rua was able to do the impossible and hit Lyoto Machida, and not just hit him, he did some severe damage. While the knockout in the rematch was impressive, it was more the leg kicks that really caught my attention. At UFC 104, Shogun put on a clinic of how to attack primarily using leg strikes. He left noticeable marks on the body of Machida and took away his mobility by attacking the legs. That could be the key in this fight. If Jones can't shoot him for the takedown because his legs are too banged up, Shogun will be in good shape. He has knockout power in his hands to go along with his debilitating leg strikes. He will counter-strike as well, opting for both kicks and punches, quickly responding to his opponent's attacks, often surprising them with how fast he is able to return fire. He will also close the distance using knees in tight in the clinch, which can ultimately lead to a takedown. He's a BJJ black belt, so he's no stranger to the grappling game, but he only holds one submission win along with 2 defeats. Based on what I've seen with Jones' takedown offense, especially against Bader, I would be surprised if Shogun had any intention of taking him down. If I were to create a game plan for each fighter, I'd want Shogun to use his leg kicks to shorten up the distance and take away Jones' mobility. Try to remain a moving target, because I noticed that when Machida and Forrest were able to get their hands on the Brazilian, they were able to score the takedown. Shogun should try to drag the young challenger into later rounds and see how he reacts. If the Rua from UFC 104 shows up, that's a benefit. But if his endurance problems from before the title fight returns, it's a big problem. Finally, the biggest key to Shogun winning this matchup is put hands on Jones' chin. Bones hasn't really been hit flush with a big power shot like Rua can deliver, and there's always that big question how a fighter will react when he tastes big power for the first time. If Shogun is able to time Jones when he attacks and counter, it could be lights out, and since he was able to do it against a very elusive striker, Machida, I'm confident he'll be able to do it here too. That is if Jones gives him the opportunity by standing with him. For Jones, the game plan should be simple. Keep doing what you're doing because it's working. In his last 4 fights, he's been able to dominate his opponents on the mat. Before hitting the floor, Bones' 8.5-inch reach advantage will help him to keep the distance from Rua in the stand-up. Rua had a slight reach advantage over Machida, so Lyoto had to come to him, but the roles will be reversed on this night. I haven't seen anything in Shogun's takedown defense that would suggest he can stop Jones from putting him on his back. Others have taken Rua down with relative ease, and I think that Jones will be looking to do the same thing. Bones will look to put the Brazilian on his back and then beat him up. Obviously, the goal of Jones' ground game will be put Shogun away, but it will also serve to wear him out. If Rua has cardio issues, spending a round or 2 on his back with Jones on top will bring them to the forefront rather quickly. I would think that Jones could look for a submission, but seeing as that Shogun is a BJJ black belt, I would think that Bones' best bet will be to beat him up and eventually open up with his elbows, leading to a stoppage. This fight is not going the distance. With Greg Jackson in his corner, I would expect that Jones' camp will recognize that standing with Rua would play right into the champion's hands. Look for Jones to shoot early, much like he did in the Bader fight, earn a dominant position, and patiently work for the finish. I could see Shogun holding out for a round on his back, but as the pressure of Jones increases and the fatigue begins to set in, openings for the challenger to attack will begin to emerge. So my prediction is the challenger, John Bones Jones, to defeat Mauricio Shogun Rua and become the next UFC light heavyweight champion by way of stoppage. Welcome to my newly named Kamikaze Countdown. I have 2 issues I'd like to touch upon. The first being the judging situation in MMA, more specifically Diego Sanchez, Martin Kampmann. I see how Diego got that win. He was more aggressive. He was throwing flurries. They weren't connecting, though. Kampmann did more damage, which was visible in Diego's face, connected more in the first 2 rounds. They were equal in the 3rd round. And the thing that really got me is that Martin stuffed almost all of Diego's takedowns, all but one. And it states in the rule book that when a fighter is successfully stuffing a takedown, he is dictating where the fight takes place, so it's equally as important as a fighter that completes a takedown. I really think the judging situation needs to be cleaned up by the associations that dictate who judges the fights, and I really think that's an issue that's hurting MMA, because when fans don't understand who's winning the fights and why they're winning it, it turns them off. Finally, before I go, UFC 129 is being rumored to be being bumped up to a 9 o'clock start. I like this, but I'd like to see the UFC go one further. Add a half hour to the prelims, give us 3 prelims each show, maybe even add another fight to the main card if they can add a half hour. I know it makes for a long night, but the more fights, the better as far as I'm concerned. There's a lot of talent out there. Get them a chance to be on TV. It'll really help the UFC and the fans to get to know what the roster consists of. Thank you for watching Kamikaze Countdown. Please feel free to leave your comments and opinions. Let me know what you think. So those are my picks for UFC 128. You can see the odds and payout on the sportsinteraction.com betting card above in the corner of the screen. For the last 2 events, I opted to do my betting on Bodog.com because they offered better options for the last 2 events, so check them out as well. Before I finish the show, I thought I would mention that I noticed Joe Rogan throwing out the word kamikaze during the Facebook prelims. This is the second time I've heard it since I started my show. I'd like to believe that Joe has checked out my prediction show at least once. That's probably wishful thinking. And again, if I hear it another time, maybe at UFC 128, I might become a believer. Alright, thank you for watching Kamikaze Overdrive MMA predictions for UFC 128, and I'll see you back here for UFC Fight Night Seattle in a very short period of time.